aiming at Korea's gaming market, Near Foundation and Metabora, the Web3 gaming affiliate of Kakao Games, are launching a partnership to promote Web3 games. Joining us now with more is Near Foundation CEO Merrick Flemel. Merrick, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Happy International Women's Day. First off, let's talk about this initiative. Tell us about what Near Foundation's up to.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for having me, and happy International Women's Day to all listeners, but also to you, Christine and Emily. So look, we're super proud to be partnered with Kakao Games. For those of you who know actually Korea always has been a very innovative gaming market. And so it's actually great to see that as a place for innovation in gaming. And when we look at actually, the past in internet innovation, gaming has always played a very, very strong part into enabling the future of gaming, of the future of the internet coming through. And so with that partnership, which is actually a pretty big deal because for those of us who are not necessarily familiar yet with Korea, Kakao Game is a little bit, and Kakao is thinking through like what would be the Google of Korea. This is quite a big deal. So we are very happy to make first strides into a market which is very focused on actually innovation in gaming, knowing that actually gaming is a lot of what often brings the future of internet innovation.
Oh,
so I don't want to interrupt. This is International Women's Day. I'm not interrupting women today.
Okay, well,
I'm keeping quiet. I'll go last.
Okay. I want to ask, I hear a lot about Near in terms of investors have been putting a lot of money into Near and as a protocol, the blockchain, et cetera. I don't hear as much about like what are the projects that are the killer use cases on Near, and maybe you could go into that. Is it Web3 gaming, and what regions are you particularly focused on?
So we announced last week in Denver that actually Near is evolving as an ecosystem and building more than what we have as a layer one. And the catchphrase for that is actually Near is the blockchain operating system. And what is a blockchain operating system? Well, a blockchain operating system is actually ultimately the front end that enable any chain to come on and to actually have the right usability. And so what we've been building at Near over the years is actually not only a layer one protocol, which is extremely fast and extremely cheap, but it's also like other necessary applications to basically be able to go up the stack. And so the announcement we made in Denver last week was actually extremely well received. We had a lot of quotes such as pretty revolutionary, extremely innovative. And so the way we think about the future of Web3 is actually that, is like building multi-chain ultimately means actually having a front end in which you can actually have different chains and front end being decentralized and moving towards that. So back to your question around gaming. Gaming is one such use case, right? But you could also think, for example, Sweatcoin is an app that is on Near that was the biggest airdrop that we announced in September last year. Well, if you walk to actually gain tokens, in a way, it's a bit kind of gaming, right? So that's what we're seeing. But ultimately, we're moving away from being just a layer one to becoming much more than that, and a blockchain operating system. And that's the nemesis of actually our strategy.
Okay.
Okay, Lawrence, go ahead.
Okay, fine. Thank you. Thank you for the permission. All right. So we have NYU. One of my alma maters. You guys are doing something with SPS, which has been involved for many years in some of the tech innovations downtown in New York back in the day. So what is this new program that you guys are doing?
Yes, so the new program is actually enabling more people to understand about blockchain, Web3, but also the sports industry and how you can actually leverage the technology and the possibilities in Web3 for sports. Because when you look at sports professionals, they themselves are actually an IP. And so with Web3, what you can do is flip on its head, reinventing IP ownership. At Near, we've actually done a lot of very successful partnership in the sports industry. For example, one such partnership is with Cell SailGP. SailGP is a sporting league that is for sailing. It's reinventing Formula One, but completely carbon neutral and in a sustainable way. And now we've actually enabled with the SailGP team to create a DAO that is fully owning a team. And so on that front, it's not necessarily like the technicalities that is difficult to put together, but it's more the legal framework. And so that's the first in the sports industry, and it's professional sports. So we bring to NYU such examples, and we actually think through, well, how do you reinvent loyalty brand, and what does it mean for the sports industry?
And so that's what the students are going to be studying is how to deal with sports marketing, correct? It's sort of, or I don't want to say sports marketing, but applying sports into Web3. And just
Correct.
Sports, or are you planning on any other programs?
Well, if you look at just sports as a start, it's actually sports is a lot of entertainment, right? So you can expand a lot of what you see as best use cases in sports in other industry. But we believe also that focusing on certain vertical actually gives much more concrete use cases. And let's face it, in Web3, what we need today is actually concrete use cases that solve for real end user problems and actually bring new solutions, right? And so that's what we aim to do here, at least to start.
So NEAR is a very global community, which is very impressive. I've seen this with my own eyes, how you have communities all over the world. And given that perspective, I'm curious if you could tell us where you think the most promising regions in the world are right now for crypto, and if you sort of agree with this increasingly popular sentiment that America is just a difficult place to do crypto business.
Well, I was listening to the first guest that you had on, and I think it's fair to say that right now, given the sentiment and what's going on in the US, it looks more and more increasingly like a difficult place to actually have Web3 innovation. Now, the reality is that Web3 and the technology that are being leveraged are completely global and borderless. And so you mentioned, Emily, for example, like a reflection of the NEAR community is what we see at our flagship conference, which is called NEARCon, which we had last September. We had 76 countries represented and 38% of women. And actually what we see right now happening is that a lot of innovation and also a lot of regulatory, let's say, ease or innovation even is happening when we go east. And so it was really interesting actually to see some of the movement, for example, of Hong Kong, but also like some of the new laws and legislation that are coming up out of Singapore, or how India is starting to think about crypto. So from my perspective, when I look at how things are evolving, what it means right now is that, new entrepreneurs and Web3 innovators are basically looking at what is the market where actually they have the more clarity and where they don't feel necessarily they will go uphill for an uphill battle from the start. And so I think looking east is definitely a good place. Again, if we look at what we are seeing starting to happen in Korea also, there is a lot of movement in Korea. There is actually a very favorable president there that is also looking at fostering innovation. And I think a lot of governments are seeing actually Web3 and that as like a way to attract talent, a way to actually attract capital, and a way to ultimately lead innovation for better use cases.
So moving on to, you mentioned the women issue, moving on to International Women's Day. So it's kind of a well-known thing, Web3 needs more women. We hear this all the time. But, as a female leader in this space, I'm just curious, like, how would you sort of define the challenges for women? I mean, what are the challenges for women that might not be sort of the most obvious kind of sound bites? Like, we need more women. Like, we sort of know that already, right? So, like, how do you kind of characterize what the key challenges are?
Well, I think one of the things that I think can be pretty much intimidating that is very specific to crypto is actually the amount of jargon that we use. And that is not inclusive, right? Using jargon that makes people feel that actually they have to, do their homework, or actually that they have to have the courage to ask questions, I think is not something that is inclusive. And I think that's something that is still very specific to crypto because, oh my God, the amount of jargon that we use in that space. And so a good way to actually lower the barrier to entry is to use less jargon, to be okay with that. And by the way, that will mean that, more and more people can use actually Web3. The second thing I would say is usability. And if we really want to bring Web3 to mainstream usage, then we have to have interfaces that are usable. We have to have things that are actually seamlessly understandable. And I think that's really important. And the last point I would just say, diversity in all forms and shape actually matter, because ultimately to bring technology mainstream, you need to incorporate every point of view to actually lower the biases that each have individually. And so I think that's what ultimately matters. But I think, one good thing that crypto could do is definitely use less jargon.
I agree.
Well, yeah. The Near Foundation will also launch the second annual Women in Web3 Changemakers Initiative at this year's Consensus by CoinDesk in Austin, Texas at the end of April. Maybe you can talk about that initiative, some of the challenges and opportunities out there for women leaders in Web3.
Yes, well, look, we did the first one last year in September, and the idea was actually very simple, is to say we have to actually showcase all the women, or as many women as possible, that are doing things in Web3. And by the way, don't need to necessarily be on Near, it can be building on anything. Because you know this proverb that you can't be what you can't see? It's so true. And actually starting by showcasing great women who are doing phenomenal things is a very good way to start. And so we were actually taken back by the amount of press coverage that we had by this first edition, and so now we are doing it again. And what we actually want to show is making sure that we can have, as many women nominated by anyone, and women who work actually on Web3. And then the idea will have to actually have a DAO that is going to be voting on the winner of this year, changemaker list. And then from there we can actually have role models that can therefore help inspire other women to get in the space.
Excellent. Well, Mariek, very excited to see you at Consensus. That was Near Foundation CEO Mariek Flamand.
Thank you.
Like I said, the Near Foundation will be presenting at our Protocol Village at Consensus by CoinDesk. It's not too late to get your tickets to the biggest crypto event of the year. Register at consensus.coindesk.com.